So welcome to the Gender in Family Project Connects. My name is Jean Malpas. I'm the founder and executive director of the Gender in Family Project. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm really delighted to have three fantastic people here with me for a conversation about families living through and surviving COVID-19. I am going to introduce our panelists. First, Jodie Patterson is an author, advocate, and mother of five. Jodie is also a member of the Gender in Family Project Advisory Council, as well as a COVID survivor. So Jodie, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
Mariam Adams is a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch and runs an LGBTQ financial practice. She is a mother of two, also a member of the Gender in Family Project Advisory Council, as well as a COVID survivor. Mariam, thank you for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And last but not least, Dr. Rachel Bluebond-Langner is Laura and Isaac Perlmutter Associate Professor of Plastic Surgery at NYU Langone Hospital. She is the mother of one and also has been working the COVID ward at NYU Langone here in New York City. Dr. Bluebond-Langner, thank you so much for being with us for this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So I've actually asked Jodie and Mariam to each describe their experience. So we're going to listen to each of you one at a time, talk about how you've been impacted with the illness, how your family has been impacted, and reflecting on it, sort of what got you through, what was most challenging as an individual, but also as a family member, and what you would like to pass on as other families who are going through this, either at home or in the hospital. And then we will hear from Dr. Bluebond-Langner about what should families think about when it comes to having a sick family member at home or sending a sick family member to the hospital. Jodie, would you like to get us started?
Yes. Hi, all. I can't tell you, being in these conversations and with certain people means more now. And it's a different experience talking, I think, for all of us. I've noticed that just talking feels different these days. We share deeper. And so I'm happy to be here to share my story. So in February, I'll say this, I was the third positive COVID patient in the state of Nevada. So that's where our family story sort of is centered in this pandemic. I was an early, I tested early. So 7 weeks ago is almost like 7 decades ago in this reality. And then I'll back up a little bit and say February for me was a really busy month. It's Black History Month. March is Women's History Month. So my job was asking that I travel all the time. I was sometimes in a different state every other day, sometimes 2 states a day. And I ended up in Vegas for a conference speaking, and 2 days later, I couldn't get out of the hospital. So I couldn't get out of the hotel room, the hotel bed. I had a splitting migraine, and I had some pain down my spine. And then I had shivers, like almost like the flu. But then I also had these surges through my fingers and my feet, like body, like just electrical surges. But the pain kept intensifying. And around, I think I probably suspected I had a low fever, but it was increasing. And so the pain was intense. And I just took myself downstairs, hopped in a taxi, and the driver took me to the closest hospital. I was by myself. And within the first few minutes, I think maybe 15 minutes, I started seeing people put masks on and gloves on, and then they started suiting up entirely. I tested for the flu first, negative. That was a blow. And then positive. The following day, my results came back for COVID, and I was positive. It kept me in Vegas for 2 weeks. It kept me in the hospital. My symptoms were what I just mentioned, but then loss of smell eventually came in as well. And a lot of brain fog is what they're calling it. At the time, it just felt like maybe I'm a little bit stunned, but it hasn't actually come back. I'm always at a loss for words now. My smell has come back. I have no more migraine. I do still have body twitches and body surges. They're like jitters almost. But I'd say this, after about 5 days, I was pretty healthy physically. I mean, I didn't need intense medical attention. But the issue for me, was that I was out of state. I wasn't from Nevada, I wasn't from Las Vegas, and they didn't know what to do with me. So the health department, Department of Infectious Disease, the Office of Emergency Situations, I think it's called, Emergency Management, they all felt that I was a health risk. So they kept me stationary as opposed to letting me travel all the way back to New York. So I was monitored for a few weeks. And it was, I think the hardest part was actually not the medical side of it. And I say that knowing how lucky that is. I didn't have respiratory issues. I didn't have to be kept alive. I didn't have to be medically treated. And in fact, the only medicine I used was pain medicine and rest. So that was pretty lucky. But the hard part was that I didn't have an advocate with me. I'm used to being the advocate. I'm an advocate for my children and for communities that I am a part of, the LGBT community, Black community, women, young people. And in this moment, I didn't have any advocate with me. So, many of us know hospital scenarios, they are laced in language and protocol and biases. And here I was, just a person off the street looking a little bit disheveled coming in, and I definitely felt racism, ageism, classism. And that's a part of, I think, being in a medical system. You become a patient and a little bit anonymous, but on top of that, I saw the things that I'm aware of outside in the world around racism and sexism and classism and ageism. So when I think about the challenges, it was to be without advocacy, to be without a voice, to be without a reputation. We take that for granted. I take that for granted sometimes. And I think I got through the 2 weeks of isolation. I saw, the only people I saw were fully suited doctors who came in and barely touched me. I didn't touch anyone. I had minimal conversations with them. But I had to develop routines in the hospital to keep me balanced. And that is what, even after getting out of the hospital, I use some of those routines now. So when I think about how this has affected me, it's really challenged me to put some of my routines into place. And I know we're in a time of confusion. We don't know what tomorrow will bring, but we can create some of the routines that keep us happy. So I have joy routines. For me, it's writing, cleaning. I started to clean my hospital room. Exercise. Also, I started to implement every day an hour of jokes with my kids and riddles. Laughter is still a non-negotiable in this moment. Some of the things that I think I might, and so 2 weeks later, I came home. I rested at home for 2 weeks. Still hadn't touched a person. Intimacy became really difficult for me after being isolated. Any form of intimacy felt dangerous. And I'm sure that's what a lot of us are going through who are in the hospitals now, who are not being touched, we're not in humane situations, right? We come out, hopefully, if we're lucky, we come out of the hospital and we survive COVID, but then the emotional impact of being isolated and not having human touch. And it makes me, it was on my mind anyway, because I know a lot of us in this world aren't seen and aren't touched and aren't treated humanely. And I felt that firsthand in a very physical way. So when I came back, I took a couple of weeks. I saw my therapist virtually. I rested, and then I saw my children 2 weeks later. I wasn't ready to see them at first. 2 weeks later, after coming home, I was ready. And I have 5, so I'm slowly taking the kids back. I have 2 with me now, and I'll take another one. I think a lot of what we're learning is that we have to heal. We were sick before COVID, actually. Our immune system was sick. Our emotional levels were sick. Our emotional health was not healthy. And our language was unhealthy. Our actions were unhealthy. And so I'm trying to really take this period to do things differently. Have a lot, slow it down, my pace. And I know, John, you're laughing because I'm a fast-paced person, but my pace has been forced to be slower. Instead of doing 50 things a day, maybe I'm doing 5. And then that's a real comparison. Sometimes I was doing 50 things and now I'm doing 5. I would keep my immune system. I would check my immune system, not overall, but I would monitor it. And I'm now monitoring it day to day. Because I think I'm a healthy person, but the week that I got sick happened to be the week that I just pushed myself so hard. So in all of this conversation around COVID, we really need to be talking about our immune systems. How do people maintain their immune systems? How do families maintain an immune system? Communities. Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be immune, right, and healthy?
Jodie, if I may jump in. Now I'm hearing you talk about how you survived and then how you adjusted, and sort of the gratitude of having survived and having been taken care of, and the also the levels of discrimination throughout that. I'm also hearing you talk about the silver lining, what you've learned, right, through this very difficult experience. What do you think has been most difficult for your family? And also, if you had to do one thing differently, whatever that is, what would it be?
Yeah, okay. You know, for me, it was hard to be in the hospital. It was hard to be sick. It's hard to be without my family, but I think the toll on my children and on my ex-husbands, I have 2, was pretty intense as well. And all the people I love. I mean, I wasn't able to mother. I wasn't able to parent in the same way. So, you know, I think when we get sick, we take time away. And that was really hard on me to take time away from my family. And then even when I was physically back, I still did not feel comfortable engaging in the way I had before. So I've been a bit removed. And I don't know if other survivors have felt this way, but I've removed myself from situations where I would have normally inserted myself, for better or for worse. And then I had to think about, how do I parent from a distance? When they were physically not in the same state as I was, but then also when we're in the same house, but I still feel that I need to remove myself. How do I still parent? And I've learned that parenting isn't always teaching a lesson. It's not always drilling down on a rule. And it's definitely not always setting up, you know, schedules. So my parenting these days has been engaging, finding something that they like to do and doing that for an hour. So I do an hour of riddles with my kid. And I usually I don't have time for riddles. I don't like them. It's always like, Mom, would you rather jump off of a building or stick your head in the sand for 10 minutes, right? So now I'm like, give the riddles to me. So that was challenging to shift to the way my relationship works with the people I love, and to remove myself because I needed to. You know, I think a lot of families are separated right now because of this. Mm-hmm. And if they were separated before, this makes the separation harder, yet we still have to remain empathetic and engaged, and we still have to remain as family. I think if I had to think this whole thing through again, the gap I see right now is that, I mean, I don't know what I would do differently, right? But the insight that I have now is what stands between us, what stands between life and death right now, or failure, breaking parts of families, or staying together as a family, is humanity. I know we have a virus and it's very critical, but we will find a vaccine for the virus. So what really stands between life and death right now is our humanity. How humane are we with each other? How much are we listening to each other? How are we treating each other? We've said this over and over, decades and